So welcome everyone to our 2020 Graham Centre Livestock Forum. With the current restrictions due to COVID-19, we made the decision a few months back to move our forum online to ensure that we can continue to access, or you can continue to access research, and also to network with others, all from the comfort of your own home office. So a couple of housekeeping things before I introduce our chairs for the day. If you are on Twitter, I'm just trying to flick there we go, then feel free to put tweets up throughout the day and use hashtag GCLivestock20. We also have a closed Facebook group so that we can continue the conversation post-forum. So those people that are on Facebook, there's the link there, GC Livestock 20. So jump on, apply to join and continue the conversation there. So we've now got a short little video that will play that will just walk through moving in and out of the sessions throughout the day, and also how to use our chat panel. So we'll get that going.
Hello and welcome along to the Graham Centre Livestock Forum 2020. What you're seeing here is the main conference landing page. You can scroll down the page and take a look at the 4 sessions that make up this event. The timings for each session are shown here, and you can click on the images to see more information. When you access an individual session, you'll be able to find a more detailed agenda and read some more about the presenters. When the time comes to begin, a large Enter Webinar button will appear at the top of this page. You will click on this link to enter the session. The second session is split into 2 concurrent webinars, one for sheep and one for beef. When these webinars are live, you are free to come and go as you please, swapping between each session if you wish to see presentations from both. Once you enter a webinar, you have a few ways to interact with the event. There is a chat panel on the right-hand side of the screen with a few different options. The first is a public chat, which allows you to chat openly to everyone in the event. And secondly, there is a private chat, which will allow you to have a one-on-one conversation with another attendee or a presenter. If you wish to submit questions during one of the many Q&A sessions, you can click on the Q&A tab and enter your question at the bottom. You may upvote other people's questions you would like answered, and they will rise to the top of the queue. Please note, you will not require a webcam or microphone to interact with the event on the day. When you wish to exit the webinar, click on the 3 dots in the top right-hand corner and select Exit Webinar. You will then be redirected to the main forum landing page.
Okay, if you have any questions throughout the day, please email me. And I neglected to introduce myself at the start of this. So I'm Tony Nugent, the Partnerships and Engagement Manager with the Graham Centre. So there's my email there. So if you've got any issues, you get lost, whatever it might be, just flick me a quick email and we'll monitor that and get you sorted. So at the end of this first session this morning, we'll have a half-hour morning tea break from 10:30 to 11. So that gives you an opportunity to stretch your legs and grab a cuppa and then come back. And I encourage you all to come back and engage with our sponsors. We'll have their videos that many of you will have seen looping through as you were registering and jumping on this morning. So they'll be playing and they'll also be available in the chat there. So please ask questions of them. And I might actually ask our sponsors if they wouldn't mind just jumping in the chat at some point shortly, just to say, who they are and identify themselves. So moving on, just finally from me, a big thank you to our sponsors this year, to Meat and Livestock Australia, to Sheep Connect New South Wales, Local Land Services Riverina, Animal Health Australia and ProWay Livestock Equipment. So thanks very much for your support. It's quite a different looking forum this year, but plenty of opportunities to engage. And without your support, we certainly couldn't run these conferences. So I'm going to hand over now. I'm just going to very quickly introduce our 2 chairs for the remainder of the day. So first, Tom Williams. So Tom completed his undergraduate and his PhD studies at Charles Sturt here in Wagga. His research focused on large ruminant health in established and developing industries, assessing the interactions between parasites, wildlife hosts, farmer management and animal disease status. Tom currently works with a multidisciplinary team looking at a novel point of decision, diagnostic tools and management practices that can improve large ruminant health and production outcomes in both intensive and extensive systems. And Kayla Kopp, who will chair our sheep concurrent session after the morning tea break. Just briefly, Kayla grew up on a merino stud in central New South Wales. She studied a Bachelor of Animal Science with honours at Charles Sturt, then worked for a little while for Landmark and Elders as a livestock advisor, and in 2017 came back to start her PhD, where she's looking at lamb mortality through altering nutrition, increasing colostrum and milk production of ewes, and the immunity transfer from the ewe to the lamb and weight gains of lambs. So thank you to both Tom and Kayla for agreeing to chair our sessions today. And Tom, I'll hand over to you to make a start.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tony. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see a really big turnout for the first session today. We've got a good panel of guests this morning to talk about containment feeding. But before we jump into that, actually, I might just ask all of our panel members to turn on their microphone, their webcams. And before they turn those on, I will just give everyone the heads up. I've pinned a post in the top of the chat. Bruce Allworth and Susan Robertson are running a trial over lambing this year. So if you're planning on feeding out during lambing this year, get in touch, have a look at what they've put in the chat there, and get in touch with Susan Robertson. So they're chasing a number of farms to join the trial for next year. Excellent. Look, we're going to keep our introductions relatively short today. As you've seen already, you can learn a little bit more about our panelists either in the proceedings or in our landing pages, but we will just quickly introduce the panel. So we've got Martin Preuss will be jumping off from Local Land Services here in Wagga. We've got Glenn Curry and Matthew Martin, who head our producers. And we've got Geoff Casburn, who we can't see on the screen just yet, but Geoff joins us from DPI here in Wagga as well. We'll get underway with Martin Preuss this morning. Just a little heads up is we've got 3 presentations, and during those presentations we'll ask you to put as many questions in the Q&A panel as possible. Upvote those if you think it's a good question. We're going to hold over all of our questions to the remaining 45 minutes in the panel session to get a good discussion going between our producers and our industry members to hopefully give you the answers that you're looking for. So Martin, if you'd like to jump in, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, Tom, my presentation is referring to stock management area, but specifically talking regarding the stock management area guidelines. And how do I press down on this? Oh, there it is. And firstly, and a few of you might be asking, we're using this term stock management area, in short SMA. It's a concept that the Local Land Services probably developed about 3-4 years ago, but and initially, certainly with the very dry times in 2016, 17 and 18, there was a lot of producers were being forced to go into a stock containment area or a stock confinement feeding area, or just as known as a drought lot by many of the producers. So to give it a bit of a term, we're actually using this term called stock management area because something that we're actually noticing and we're finding that producers are finding very much with it is, and as we state there, producers often think initially that it's a bit of a sacrifice paddock. They're just converting a sacrifice paddock into a confinement feeding area. But once someone sets up a stock management area, they'll actually find it'll be a part of land that they now have on their property that can be used up to probably 8, 9, if not 12 months of the year during different production processes for either the sheep or cattle operation. But again, the definition, it's a stock management area is not a feedlot, and as you can see there, because the EPA, the development application for a feedlot comes into act when you have 4,000 sheep or over, 1,000 cattle or 400 horses. You then need to apply for a development application. So let's just explore this a bit further. The pros and cons of an SMA, again, whether it's referring to that or again as a stock management area. The pros, effectively, well, you've got two areas there. Specifically, it's under the term reduced, but stocking rates. But more importantly, what we're looking at is preserving. It allows you opportunity to preserve topsoil, ground cover and nutrients, because it's often something that we often find through those dry times is that, once you lose the ground cover, you just get a lot more dust, and then it just takes a lot longer to recover. But in that, again, as well, the fact that the animals are in a confined area, livestock energy needs, there's a 10 to 15% saving in livestock energy needs. The other main benefit of it is, and as it just states there again, it's an opportunity there to maintain, if not improve, your core breeder base, perennial pastures, pasture response. And this is specifically an important one, pasture response rates after rain, because the difference between having 30 mil of ground cover at 50% density compared to having something at 50 or 70 mil of ground cover at 80% density is, with 10, 15, 20 mil of rain, you'll have feed 3 weeks earlier, is the simple result of that. The downside of it, the cons of it, effectively the costs, well, effectively they're in a confinement area, so you're going to need to provide a feed ration for them, so there'll be a cost of ingredients, whether it's hay, silage or grain, and then you've also got the infrastructure costs to put the stock management area together. And then potentially, because you've now got them into a confined housing area, and the fact that they're now being fed a grain component, well, you've also got the opportunity there where there could be grain poisoning, ammonia toxicity, pulpy kidney, hypercalcemia, salmonella, coccidiosis. Just some of the areas there that generally increase once they're in that confined area. And you'll see that I've got ensure water quality and supply is critical. I will talk a bit more about that shortly. But first, I just want to talk about the selection site. And the key areas here, again, it's size and location, slope and drainage, soil type, and I've just got here again, water quality, water quantity and water reliability are very important. And we've then got vegetation, all-weather access, distance to feed, distance to your own house, neighbours' properties, distance to waterways and the water table for runoff. During your, so say with dung and urine in stormwater or heavy rain running off the confinement area or running off the property is always a concern. So that's one thing that often comes to me. It's when we talk about size and location, I think is probably one of the misunderstood areas about a stock management area or confinement feeding area, is that often people assume it's going to take up hectares. No, you can effectively probably house 2,500 head within half a hectare. It's not a big area. So just moving on from there, and again, just with that site selection, and probably the two key areas we like to look at is slope and drainage. Ideally, you only want a 3 to 4% optimum slope, maximum of 6%. Avoid boggy hollows or drainage lines. Top of the slope is preferred, and the next slide will probably explain that a little bit better. And avoid any excessive slope, which again it can run into public waterways, which then again the EPA will have many concerns with that if it happens. But site selection, buffer distance is very important. Ensure the runoff from the site does not contaminate any natural water courses. But I find here, and if you look at the third point there, use a 500 metre buffer or a minimum distance from the SMA to occupied house due to the noise and or odour concerns, and that's again where the neighbours could be of a issue or concern there. So it's you're just taking the due diligence there and respect for the neighbours in that case. But SMA design, well, suggestion minimum stocking densities is, and this is what I was just saying there before about size, is that for sheep or lambs, you're looking between 2 to 5 square metres per head is required. So for weaners, we're talking cattle there, you've got weaner cattle 9 to 10 metres, yearlings 12 to 14, cows 15 to 25, and for cows and calves 100 plus metres. But interesting, tighter stocking density can actually reduce dust in pens, and it's what we've often found is that more feet but less bare ground, and as I say, it just helps to prevent that dust accumulation and that dust blowing around. And again, straw on the bed of the pens, it can also then be another dust suppressant as well. SMA design. And this is the interesting thing, and I'm sure this is where, with Glenn and Matthew that are going to be following, is that you'll probably see a couple of very different designs there. But again, there's no perfect SMA, because really it gives you the opportunity to tailor the right SMA to design to suit your property. But rectangular shape is generally one that's often ease of management, ease of putting together, minimising water contamination, maximising trough allocation, reducing social stress, probably the areas there. And again, design just simply available area, number of pens and pen number, capital input, management time, labour, equipment and personal preference. But traditionally, I actually might have just skipped a little bit in that initial about site selection, but often one of the key things that come up is, depending on where you've got your silos, your hay shed, you've got your mixer, whatever it is, your machinery shed, because you can lose a lot of time very quickly in running a confinement feeding area or a stock management area. So you want to have the resources available that you're not going to lose a lot of downtime running backwards and forwards. And this is a sort of a typical design that is often put forward, where we've got a rectangular base, you've got the pen at the slope, but ideally what you want to do is have the feeders, and now whether that's a troughing system or it could be conveyor belt on the ground or even just simply running the grain on the ground, or you've got your feeders, but traditionally you'll want them up the at the top end, up the upslope of the pen. So and the water troughs, water containers based at the southern end of the southern side of the slope of the pen, and that's again just to ensure that you don't have water running back into the feeding area, which then just exacerbates the problem of having a boggy feed area around the hay or specifically the self feeders, or the feeding area. Again, just feeding. We're getting back to what the resources, the components making up the feed going to the sheep or the cattle. Well, feeding again recommendations is again you've got the for troughing, single-sided access. You need about 30 plus centimetres per head, double-sided, because again simply the word double-sided. You can actually cut that in half back to 15 centimetres per head. Self feeders, we're looking there between 3 to 5 centimetres per head. So for a typical 2.4 metre feeder, well, there's 110 to 120 head of sheep can access that. For cattle, we're then looking at weaners, 25 to 30 centimetres, yearlings, adult cattle up to 40 to 60 centimetres as your ideal trough space recommendations there. Water quality and water quantity, and again, I'm going to make a point here of just elaborating this again, because water is probably the one of the most important areas of the nutritional requirements of sheep, because again, you have water, protein, energy, minerals, vitamins, sort of go in that ratio, and for sheep, as I say, you can see there between 4 to 6 litres per day is required. Cattle, 60 to 100 litres of water per day. Pasture supply a portion of the daily water, but containment diets typically low in water, less than 10%. But the main concern that we have is with as weather, hot intake demand of water increases with hot weather. Hot or salty rations will increase water consumption, but also at the same time, you can actually get the offset effect of when it does get hot, you can actually have water heat, the actual water itself actually heating up. And once that starts to get above 28 to 30 degrees Celsius, it will start to limit water intake. So there's a lot of information here to talk about, which we can offer on a personal basis if someone requires. But water quality recommendation: sheep 30 centimetres plus per head, plus an extra centimetres per sheep. So ideally, there, if you had 10 sheep, you'd be looking at 310 centimetres of length of troughing to cater for those 10 sheep. For the spacing, cattle, you require a space for about 10% at once. Flow rate is generally a minimum of about 10 litres per head per hour is what you require. Hay. Feeding, again, an important consideration. In the two areas here, we talk about hard to stop excess contamination and waste with feeding hay. I traditionally find that using a feeder, a cage, or something of some description does eliminate a lot of the waste. It could be, again, another 10, 15%, up to probably 30% can be reduced if the hay is contained within a feeder source of some description, as opposed to just laying it on the ground as a large square bale, because you will have the livestock, specifically sheep, and if it's younger lambs, they will just want to jump all over it as their playground. But and as unfortunately, we're not suggesting that this is the ideal situation you should be doing, where you're going to actually see the poor ewe here that's stuck in the feeder. So again, I think using the correct hay rack is the appropriate choice, and maybe not using a cattle rack for a sheep confinement feeding area. So again, would you like further advice? Yeah, please feel free to contact the Riverina Local Land Services through either the email address or through our 1300 number. And yeah, I'm the livestock officer based here at Wagga, so I'm very happy to help with any advice if anybody's more interested in going forward with a confinement feeding area. Thank you again, and this has been the alliance between Charles Sturt University and New South Wales Department of Primary Industries. Thank you.
Martin, thanks a lot for your presentation. I've just got one question for you. I'll ask Glenn if you could please turn on your camera, and while that's turning on, I'll just get one specific question for you there, Martin. That question is from Bruce Allworth. So you mentioned that you can have 4,000 sheep in an SMA.
Yes.
Sorry. So you mentioned that we can have 4,000 sheep in an SMA before you need approval for a feedlot. Can we have 3 SMAs, if that makes sense, and have 4,000 sheep head in each of those, or where does that line get drawn?
Effectively, once you get 300 or 3,999 sheep in a confinement area, is regarded as a stock management area. As soon as you tip over 4,000, you require an EPA allocation. So if you wanted to have 3 lots of but it gets back to it'll get back to the proximity and closeness of each of the sites, but it's on a per property basis.
Yeah, okay.
So if there's a second property, feeding a different aquifer system, feeding a different watercourse system, whatever, then you would need same thing. Up to 3,999 would be applicable. Once you tip over that, it then tips into being the DO will be approved to go to a feedlot status.
Thanks, Martin. Excellent. So we're going to move on to Glenn Curry now. Glenn comes from Junee Reefs, and he's been containment feeding for over a decade now. So we're going to hear some of the wins that he's been having on his property.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Glenn Curry. I own and manage a family mixed property in the Junee Reefs Dernacia area, along with my brother Brian, nephew Timothy, and son Tom. I certainly hope the season is treating you all well this year. Our mixed farming enterprise comprises of 2,800 hectares, 90% arable. The soil type is a red-brown loam over clay with an average rainfall of 500 mils. We've received 330 mils up to date for the season, so things are looking good at the moment. This year we have 1,800 hectares of mixed cropping with 1,000 acres for grazing, comprising of 800 hectares of lucerne clover and 200 hectares of native pastures. Our sheep enterprise consists of 4,000 merino ewes, a nucleus of 2,000 self-replacing merino flock, and the remaining 2,000 merinos are joined to terminal size. Confinement lots play an integral part of our sheep management on our farm today. Today I'm going to give you a rundown on our experience, on our experiences at a grassroots level. Our first confinement lot was built in 2008. After purchasing more property and increasing our ewe numbers, we have built a second confinement lot in 2019. The confinement lots are predominantly used from February through to May each year after shearing. A little bit of management. Merino ewes are joined to terminals, are joined after January shearing for 10 weeks max, and are scanned for 5 weeks intervals to identify singles and twins. Merino self-replacing ewes are then joined after shearing in February for a maximum of 5 weeks. We have found that the scanning for singles and twins allow us to target nutritional needs, especially with confinement lots. All ewes graze cereals and canola stubbles after harvest. And when they deteriorate, they are supplemented with barley and generally canola silage to prepare them for confinement lots. Depending on the summer and the autumn, ewes are then inducted into the confinement lots to maintain ground cover and allow perennial pastures to maintain themselves. This generally occurs after shearing in February. We generally don't put crossbred lambs into confinement lots. They generally stay on lucerne pastures supplemented with grain feeders. This year we put crossbred lambs into confinement lots in a confinement lot, and we occurred 7 deaths in 7 days. Removed from the confinement lot, had no further problems. We contributed that, put down to pneumonia and dust at the time. Merino wether and ewe lambs will find their way into the confinement lots after shearing, depending again on the autumn. Confinement lots provide us the opportunity to manage age groups differently and divide ewes up according to condition. This enables us better to manage the nutrition and the condition of sheep. The use of confinement lots has allowed us to maintain or even increase our stocking rate, yet not compromise ground cover when dry. We are not having to sell down during a drought or even potentially buy it when it rains. The design. The design of our first confinement lot consisted of 7 rectangular pens, 80 metres by 50, a 4,000 square metre on a non-arable stony hill. Recommended guidelines for stocking rate for sheep is 2 to 5 per square metre. The stocking density of our confinement lots is determined by the length of the rubber belted feed trough in the middle of the pen. We work on 5 sheep per metre of trough, allowing all sheep to feed at the same time evenly on both sides of the trough. In an 80 by 50 metre pen, we run a 60 metre trough, which allows comfortably 300 sheep. An integral part of our confinement lot is the rubber belted feed trough. It's made out of a 17mm thick rubber belting, 800mm wide, and is suspended in a saddle made of 50 by 25mm RHS. And the approximate cost for that per metre was $12 per metre. Our latest confinement lot was built in 2019, was designed to suit the area and very close to the sheep yards. Again, the stocking rate is determined by the length of the trough. All pens are serviced with a 2-metre concrete water trough on town water. Induction of the sheep. Prior to ewes entering the confinement lots, ewes are generally conditioned to barley and silage. All ewes entering the confinement lots are worm tested and drenched. We have found this a good practice as it minimises health issues down the track. All sheep are fed 3 times a week, grain 3 times a week, and they are alternatively fed silage and straw in between. On average, each sheep last year received approximately 340 grams of barley and 570 grams of canola silage per day. Obviously, this will vary from year to year depending on the grain quality and the silage quality. We add lime to the grain. Rations are adjusted according to the after scanning for singles and twins. All grain is fed into the rubber belt trough using a Bromar feed cart with scales via the auger. We have found this minimises grain loss and all sheep have able to access the feed at the same time. Having scales on the feed cart allow us to be more accurate with our feeding. Silage and barley straw is fed in a full bale on the ground. Joining in feedlots, no hesitations in joining in feedlots. We join at 1.5% with very good results, with a 5-week maximum joining period for merinos over merinos, and as I said before, terminals are joined for 10. Scanning after joining, all ewes are scanned for singles and multiples to allow us to manage these sheep better and allow us to adjust the feed accordingly. As seen on the screen, our scanning results for 2020 were very good, as all these sheep were joined in confinement lots, and the results confirm that there is no problem joining sheep in confinement lots. Health issues. Over the years, we have had minimal losses, on an average no more than 1%. Wet inclement weather can play havoc with health issues. Obviously not conducive to confinement feeding with wet weather. Ideally, you should have an escape plan when if you have a continual wet week. Shy feeders are generally drafted off, usually when we take the rams out or at scanning. Put into paddock to recover, and then they may re-enter the feed of the containment lot later on. The release of sheep. Sheep are let out into neighbouring paddocks during continual wet weather for general hygiene. When taking ewes out of the containment lot, we do it as gradually as possible, taking into account for their animal health and wool quality. All ewes will come out of the confinement lots approximately 3 weeks prior to lambing. Lambing in feedlots, we've never, or I shouldn't say feedlots, we have not lambed in containment lots and don't intend to at this stage. We find by putting sheep into the confinement lots, we are maintaining our pastures and find they respond much better when the autumn does break. Other uses for the confinement lots, we have our second confinement lot, which is located next to a set of sheep yards, is invaluable to our sheep operation generally. Throughout the year, these confinement lots are used as holding pens for scanning, lamb marking, crutching, weaning, general sheep work, or a holding paddock prior to transport. A great asset. In summary, we have found the following benefits of confinement lots to our farm. Maintain ground cover, maintain and increase stocking rate, protect your investment in pastures. Pastures respond much better after the autumn break. Stock are more contented. They're not wasting energy running around chasing that last blade of grass in a dusty paddock. stock maintained condition. You can maximise your feed value. After scanning, singles and multiples can be better managed with feed and nutrition. Feed troughs, I feel, are maximise or minimise your grain losses. And the other thing is maximise your time. You're not driving kilometres around the property feeding sheep. So their hence saves fuel and wear and tear on your vehicle. Take-home message today is confinement lots are a very valuable management tool for all grazing operations, allowing you to be flexible with the management of pastures according to the season. Thank you very much.
Well, Glenn, thank you very much for your presentation. It's really great to have a look at your operation there and see how you've sort of grown with it over time. I'll invite Matthew Martin to turn on his microphone, and while we're waiting for Matthew, I'll just ask you quickly, you say you're feeding grain 3 times a week. Do you have a transition period to get them into that? Like what are your practices when you're bringing them in?
Well, normally they are being fed barley and silage in the paddocks prior to that. So generally after harvest they graze the stubbles, and when the stubbles start to deplete, we supplement them with barley and silage. So they're conditioned prior to going into a containment lot.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Glenn. We'll move on now to Matthew Martin. And Matthew joins us from Mullinjandra. Is that correct? Have I got that right? Excellent.
Mullinjandra.
Mullinjandra. I was like, I'm going to say this and it's going to be wrong. So, look, Matthew's also got a video in the middle of this, which gives us a really exciting view of his setup at home. So, yeah, please join us in welcoming Matthew.
Thanks, Thomas. So good morning, everybody. If you did miss it, the introduction, my name is Matthew Martin. And I am the owner/manager of Old Crop and Pastoral, a family grazing business 20 k's south of Holbrook, a little place called Mullinjandra. Look, I'll be just talking about containment feeding and our experiences with it in the last 3 years and how it's changed our total business and business management and grazing. Currently running around 4,500 merino ewes. This includes about 500 pole merino stud ewes and 150 Angus beef cattle breeders. Our property is about 1,200 hectares of farming land and approximately 600 hectares of restricted grazing land set aside for conservation with a covenant. We're originally from Deniliquin, but moved our operations to Holbrook, New South Wales in about early 2015. And we've gone from a rather extensive grazing system to a much more intensive system in a higher rainfall zone. The containment feeding is, without any debate, it's improved capacity and efficiency of feeding livestock through the dry times, predominantly summer and autumn. And originally the containment fens were constructed to help alleviate stress during the drought, but we soon realised that these are something that we would use year in, year out. So just some of the basic advantages of the containment feeding is, like it's already been covered, but preserving ground cover, much faster pasture response post-rainfall, reduced feeding time. Beforehand, it used to take at least the majority of the day by the time you drove around every single paddock, but now we can do it within 2 to 3 hours. Reduced feed wastage. They're all being fed in a trough, so there's nothing being wasted on the ground. Reduced energy expenditure. We all know what sheep are like, and cattle as well. If there's not much feed, they'll still spend their whole day wandering the paddocks searching for it. And the containment pens can also be used as holding paddocks pre-shearing, crutching, scanning. And we've also found them very handy to be used as single sire mating pens within the stud. Obviously, there's very, very good ewe and ram contact. Site selection. All the pens, it's probably not the best photo, but all the pens were built on very marginal country. So it's quite steep, rocky. You could never sow it. So it's the land that we're actually using was very, very unproductive. And you can see it's all very close to hay sheds, silos, shearing sheds, yards. And all the pens are accessible off a laneway system that you can see in the photo of next to the tree line. Pen size. All sheep have a minimum of 5 square metres each. The pens were built in a rectangular shape. This allows for good length of to allow feed troughs to be constructed up along one side. So average pen is about 100 by 50 metres, and this obviously can hold around 450 sheep. For a pen that size, you could actually have more sheep in there, but we're restricted by having enough bunk space or trough space per animal. Feed out system. All the feeding of the pens is actually carried out externally, so there's no need to drive in the pens or open and shut gates. We've just got a modified Bromar feed bin with an extendable auger on an A-frame, and it just it's got a flexi pipe off the end of it, and it just bends and moves over the fences. So the only thing you need to do is get out of the vehicle to start the actual auger itself. I'll show you a photo in the next slide of all this. And also the Bromar feeder has scales on it, so there's very high accuracy of measuring how much each animal should be getting. So there's a photo there. You can see the Bromar feeder on the back of the ute, and it's just got a frame on it, and the auger just runs the grain up through the auger, and it's got a flexi pipe that then falls down into their trough. The feeding system. So I'm a big believer in allowing a minimum of 30 centimetres of single-sided trough space per animal. If they can get double access, as you can see here, they can get to both sides of the trough. You can reduce that down to 20 centimetres, but we've just found if you have any more than or less than 30 centimetres of trough space, single-sided per animal, you just end up with more shy feeders and higher chance of grain poisoning. So yeah, basically, if you're containment feeding, all sheep need to be able to feed at once if they're on a restricted diet. We did begin with single-sided troughs, but then after building 2 or 3 pens, I think we transitioned to moving over to double-sided troughs, as we just were finding out we're just going to have too many troughs, and this was allowing a lot more sheep in per pen and per trough. Far more economical. I've just worked out that the trough system itself, it works out at about $3.10 per sheep. The troughs themselves, they're just constructed out of 300mm PVC pipe. It's just stormwater pipe that's been cut in half with a chainsaw, and then they're just all tech screwed to a timber block that you can see. and at where each pipe is joined, or PVC pipes joined together, there's a timber block under there with a little half cut post, just a star picket to hold it in place so they don't knock it over. And look, all those PVC pipes, we've got quite a few of them now, but they've all been just cut with a chainsaw. The water troughs. So our water source is actually sourced through a solar powered bore. We have two 20,000 litre tanks that are filled automatically through the solar power bore, and it has a float valve up at the two tanks, and once they're filled, that automatically shuts off. These two tanks have been able to service approximately 5,000 sheep comfortably, even through the peak of summer. These water troughs that we've actually built ourselves, they've just been used with or made with 150 mil PVC pipe, and they're just cut in 6 metre lengths. There's a screw cap on the end to allow for cleaning and letting the dirty water out, I suppose. And there is a slight fall. At the opposite end, it has a 300 mil sleeve to allow a large float valve for entry of the water trough. The larger the float valve you can have in there, the bigger the flow rate. So obviously high flow rate, the water is always a constant level is being kept in the water trough, and then also allows high flow rate, high amount of flushing for when you clean the trough. The PVC pipe has 10 access points along it, and they're about 80 mils. We look at these PVC pipes, we did construct them ourselves, the troughs, I mean, and we have worked out that they're equivalent roughly to the same as a concrete trough, but we feel they keep the water a lot cooler and a lot cleaner too. It doesn't have the surface area to allow dust and dirt and all that getting in. We do have some pens set up for production feeding lambs, basically. Any lambs that don't finish out in the paddock, we do bring them in and put them on lick feeders. So 1,500 square metre pen would be enough room for 300 lambs per pen, and that would work on 3 lick feeders per pen. So 100 lambs per lick feeder, any more than that, and we see that there's an increase in shy feeders, grain poisoning, bullying, all that kind of thing. All lambs are introduced to into the feedlot pens via the containment pens. So they actually start in the containment pens, and so we can allow safe introduction of grain. They're fed with the Braemar feeder as well, the trail feeder, I mean, sorry. So they just start off at 100 grams per head per day, and they're just slowly increased up to until they're on 1 kilo, and then by then they're safe to go on a lick feeder. So probably some of the key points that I would like to go back over is a minimum of 30 centimetres trough space per animal. All sheep, when they're in contained, I believe they need to be able to feed at once if they're getting grain. Like Martin said, clean, cool water is essential. It's probably the first thing, especially in the summer, that they will go to and need. The containment pens themselves, they don't need to be anything too flash. They just need to be functional and be able to work and do the job. I would really try and keep them close to yards and silos, and it just makes it easier. And if something's not easy, you're not going to want to do it. And if they are being fed grain and being contained, I'd maintain that they always have access to salt, lime and Corsmag, especially lime. It just helps balance the phosphorus in the grain, and which is really, really important, especially in mid to late pregnancy, especially. Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity for letting me speak today. I hope you all got something out of it. I'll hand back to Thomas, I believe. We've just got a short a YouTube video that was made or put together with us and Riverina LLS. We'll put that on now and have a watch.
Excellent.
Thanks, guys.
Matthew. And just while we're waiting for that to load, be sure to ask any questions that you've got, and we'll get to them soon.
The containment feeding works really, really well for us in this area, high rainfall zone with significant amount of stock on a small area. All the sheep are brought into the containment pens and fed in a trough system from the outside of the pens, and we do have pens set up for production feeding lambs in lick feeders.
Feeding works really, really well.
It is. It's really important to protect your country, get sheep off, get them into a confined area where you can control the feed and the energy they consume, and obviously protect the land at the same time. A real spin-off you get from that is that while you've got them off your pastures, they're getting away and really growing strongly, and if you graze them all the time, they're not quite as productive.
Plenty of other times of the year we can use them, during joining, prior to joining, during pregnancy, to push ewes along, but principally to take pressure off the paddocks.
In containment we can hold about 3,500, but the next step is building more.
And more area, more trough space, in particular, just to reduce that shy feeder impact.
About trough space, you know. There's not a real lot to it. It's fencing material, troughs for water and troughs for feeding, and that's pretty much it. It's put on a real low productive portion of our land that wasn't producing much anyway.
You do have to manage coming out of containment areas, making sure that the new feed doesn't cause any toxicity or acidosis or any other animal health issues.
There's animal health, animal welfare, economics. You know, we take them off the paddocks, we save the paddock, the topsoil, nutrients, all that sort of thing, but we're also saving energy. So it's not costing us much to maintain those sheep.
Obviously you've got that 10 to 15% less energy requirements, so therefore your feed stocks in theory should last longer. So, and you can also manage that as well because you know what feed stocks you have in reserve, and you can plan ahead, especially if you use the new app, the Drought Feed Calculator.
But in a containment area, you've really got to provide everything for that animal. Adequate trough space, nice clean water, shade and shelter, particularly over the summer period. Yeah, and just keep things simple.
They don't have to be anything extravagant. They just, as long as they serve the purpose, and they'll be there forever. You'll use them. We will use them every year, no matter what. And there's no reason why they can't be used for old stock, young stock, sheep or cattle. They'll pay for themselves without any doubt.
The Martin family have done a really good job here. It's fantastic.
This has helped our business immensely. This year, without any doubt, would be the most amount of feed we've had any autumn, purely from having our sheep contained and letting our pastures grow. The answer is containment areas. They really do work. Good for the sheep, good for your business, good for the country.
Excellent. Well, if I could invite all of our panelists to turn their videos on. And if anyone's looking to watch that video again, it is on YouTube in the LLS account. I think Martin will confirm that, and Matthew potentially. So we've got Geoff Casburn joining us now. So this is the first time we've seen Geoff's face today. Geoff's based at DPI here in Wagga. Good foggy morning.
Morning all.
Morning, Geoff. Got a couple of great questions coming through. We're just waiting on a few more videos to pop up, and we'll get into it. Thanks, Martin. Excellent. All right, we've got our group. I will probably turn my video off in a minute so you can see all of our panelists a little bit better. We've got a few good questions coming in. We're going to start with our highest voted ones, so we've got a few at the top of our Q&A panel. If you do like the questions, be sure to vote them up. If you have any questions, be sure to put them in, and if we don't get to them this morning, we'll try and get a little synopsis together from all of our panelists and shoot out some answers. So our first question today is directed at Glenn, but we can open this up to the board afterwards. Glenn, we've got a question from Hannah, which is, could you please go into more detail about how you manage slow release of ewes out of the confinement area before lambing?
Good morning, Hannah. Normally what we do is have a loosened paddock, with the pasture paddock next to a smaller paddock, which has generally been used in the past. It's a holding paddock, and we let them on for an hour for the day, hunt them off, hunt them back on, increase the time over the period of the week, so that they slowly get used to the fresher feed, so we don't have a problem with their health or their wool factor. But yeah, just slowly over the course of a week or 10 days, increasing the amount of time that they can graze in that paddock.
Excellent, and we might open that up. Thank you very much, Glenn, and just ask: has anyone got any other information to add to that, where we're talking about moving out of the confinement feeding before lambing?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't mind adding something.
Thanks, Geoff.
Look, often what's happening is you're going to be continue to feed when you do let them out. So it really depends on what's happening in terms of when that is, like whether there's been some sort of break or pasture that you're going to be putting them out onto. So really ensuring that you feed them first before you let them out is an important thing, and just continue that feed up while they're transitioning onto pasture. So I think that's also helpful as well, because often it's logistical issues about you've got a number of pens and you've got to try and put them into paddocks. The other thing I'd say is that some people are concerned about letting them out and impact that they may have on paddocks at lambing time. But what I would suggest to people is that if you're feeding adequately when you put them out on those paddocks, the majority of what they're going to be eating is what you're providing them, even if conditions in those paddocks aren't ideal when you let them out, because it's going to be driven by what's happening at the time. And from people that I've spoken to, lambing in containment can cause a lot of issues. So really letting them out so they've got more space and continue to feed while you do that is probably something that's key.
Thanks, Geoff. Any other points to add to that one, or we can move on to another question? No, all good. Well, I think we've covered that. I hope we've answered the question for you, Hannah. We'll move on now. We've got Bruce Allworth with another question. I actually had a similar one, so I might join it up. We've got a comment on shade, on the provision of shade. How does heat stress play into the confinement feeding area? Have you had any experiences? Would you think about bringing shade in? And then I'll back up that as well by considering like water temperatures. Do you ever have concerns about water temperatures in those hot periods, and are you dumping water to make sure that it's not getting up above 20-something degrees? We might ask Matthew that to start with.
Yep. Yeah, no dramas. I guess the shade, I'll talk about that first. I think ideally if they did have shade, it would be better. Some of our pens do have shade, some don't. I guess the water side of things is more important than the shade side of things. So if, excuse me, if you want to change one thing, I'd be concentrating on making sure they have good, clean, cool water. And airflow is probably a good one. Like sheep can somewhat thermoregulate themselves, I believe, with wool and clean water. So making sure the water is clean and cool, which we've found with those PVC pipe troughs, that's not really a big issue because there's actually not a huge amount of water in the trough, and it's constantly, as sheep drink, it's constantly being replenished. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Geoff or Martin, have you got anything to add to that in terms of the provision of shade? Have you seen any confinement feeding areas where shade seems to be giving you a positive production outcome?
Well, I mean, obviously all of us like getting in the shade in the heat of the day, so animals are no different. There's plenty of paddocks around that don't have a lot of shade at different times, and even you'll see stock standing out in the sun when they do have shade at different times. So it's not vital. However, I think shade is an important issue, and I think there's some really quite cheap ways of providing shade, and one of those is providing shade cloth along a fence line and just having it coming out from the fence by maybe a metre or two. So having length, so it provides not only, and put it on the right side of the pen if you can, where you're getting most of your shade in the afternoon and from the centre of the day as well. But having that overhang can be quite useful. So I think, you know, one of the great things about today's webinars, we've heard from Glenn and Matt, and they've, you know, farmers are really great at coming up with cost-effective ways of containment feeding. And so, you know, where possible, look at how you can provide shade cost effectively. But, you know, I would say if you can't provide shade, that's still, that's not a huge issue. Containment feeding is much more important than being majorly concerned about providing shade in the first instance.
Yeah, I might just add to that.
Sorry, Martin, if I could just get you to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Sorry, Geoff, I was just going to say, look, yeah, the question about heat and heat stress, but I think we've already suggested it. If shade, again, it all gets back to costing, putting up shade cloth, whatever's going to be appropriate. But I think one thing that would really help, if there is issues with heat stress, is even if the water area, could the water troughing, the water supply, if the shading is required, certainly on those hot, you know, westerly sunny afternoons, if there's some way the water can be kept at a cooler temperature, because as heat stress increases, water uptake increases, and that's what then it just exacerbates the whole heat stress issue. If they can't get the access to water, all the water is just too hot for them to access. So if as a minimum, the water supply can be, whether that requires shading to keep it at a cooler temperature, is all I'd suggest.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, guys. I think we've answered that pretty well. So we'll move on to the next one. It came from me, actually. It was in relation to your wet weather plan, Glenn. So I just wanted to know if you could elaborate on how you're handling sort of an extended wet period, and we can definitely open that up as well to our other panellists.
It's pretty simple. If we have a long wet weather period, a wet week, we normally have to box the sheep, put them out into paddocks, and put them back out into the grazing paddocks or a paddock close to the yards until the pens dry up, and then we have to put them back in again. I know it's a bit of a job, but that's what we do. If it's only raining for the day or 2 days, normally it's not too bad because the pens are well drained. It's only that if we get the continued wet weather for a week, and then they just got to go out to the paddocks for that time. And
thank you, Glenn. And Matthew, have you got any? Thanks, Glenn. Matthew, have you got any sort of protocol that you're using when you get long extended wet periods?
Not really, no, to be honest. Where the pens actually are, it is actually quite steep, so the water does run away very, very well. But the only thing I was probably increased roughage, so they sort of, you know, so they've got that good gut feel, whether it's like typically we really only feed barley and straw while they're being in containment, but look, we might give them a bit of hay as well. Yeah, they definitely do look for the roughage when it's a bit wetter or a bit colder. Yeah.
Thank you. We might move on from that one, and we'll get to a question here that was raised earlier about it was a bit of a statement, but we've got a couple of follow-ups to that, so I'll just try and find those. It was to do with dust and how that impacts on wool. So we've got a point raised here in the chat, which was having a confinement area might see an impact on dust in wool. What have your experiences been with that issue? Has it been an issue? We've also got a follow-up to that, which is a bit of a statement from Laura Chemist, so I might just read that out because it's worthwhile pointing out. So Laura's responded to that by saying, when thinking about the impact of dust on wool yield, you should also consider GFW and style. And that's in there in the Q&A point. So if anyone would like to have a look at that one, it's there to have a look. She's just mentioned dust penetration and style will affect or what discount you're going to attract. So yeah, look, have you had any issues with wool discounts essentially from just off the back of containment feeding, and has that been a consideration for you? Glenn, I might open to you.
Well, as I said before, we only put our sheep into containment lots after shearing, so they're bare shorn when they enter the containment lots. So we minimise our dust factor in the wool.
Thanks, Glenn.
And even merino weather lambs will find their way into a confinement feeding, but that's after shearing, not before.
Thanks. That's one way to get around the problem. Matthew, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I guess I will be honest, it's probably not something I really considered at the start before building the containment pens, but in general, I would actually say there's probably less dust penetration, because if they're out in big open paddocks that are, in the middle of summer and they're walking, you can get big swells of dust and they will get a huge amount of dust penetration. But when there's, a larger amount of sheep in a smaller area with just urine and everything, it just doesn't, you just don't get the blow, the amount of dust blowing around. That's what I've just found in our country anyway. So I'd say actually possibly better, reduce dust.
Yeah. Geoff, you were nodding there. Did you have anything to add to that?
Oh, well, I think Matt sort of said that pretty well, because it's relative. Generally you're going to have stock in containment areas. It's going to be hot and dry generally. And as Matt says, you can see a plume of dust when stock are walking through a stubble paddock. So, dust potentially is an issue, but all the advantages of containment feeding outweigh that. And as Matt says, if your stocking density in your containment feeding is pretty good, and that dust is minimised. The other thing that I would say is rainfall has a large impact, and obviously if you can get rain before shearing, that's beneficial. So sometimes, depending on how much dust you got in your wool and at what time of year you're generally shearing, you can potentially think about delaying shearing if that makes any sense, if you're coming into a period where rain is which doesn't sound very practical, but like shearing is important, and whether you get rain. So it's one of those things. Sometimes you're going to have, whether you got stock in containment, dusty wool, and then other times, depending on when you shear and how that matches when you use containment, like Glenn says, that'll impact.
Thanks, Geoff. Moving on here, we've got a question from Tony. Tony was just wondering if we could comment on trail feeding on the ground compared to in the troughs, and we might even then relate that back to our rubber troughs versus our PVC as well, and see if there's any benefits or bothers. But we'll start with Martin on this one, if you wouldn't mind giving your insights into sort of feeding on the ground versus feeding in troughs.
Yeah.
Thanks, Thomas. Look, from work that's been done and what we've seen traditionally when comparing directly there to just feeding on the ground, trailing out on the ground, to feeding in a troughing system, or in whether it's just rubber building on the ground or it's a bit of C-section put on the ground, we've found there's actually a saving of anywhere from probably 5 to 15% in loss of grain. So I think it gets back to the cost of putting that form of feeding, troughing, belting, C-section, whatever it's going to be down on the ground. There's certainly a cost to do that. But again, at the time that you're getting anywhere from up to a 15% regain of loss of grain, I think is very worthwhile. So that's my point on it. Geoff, whether he wants to add to that, but certainly has been years of work has been done with this, and that's what the numbers tell us.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. We've just got a comment here from Bruce Allworth as well, which I'll bring to light, which says, specific comment, we need to be careful in confinement feeding. Trail feeding works well when you can feed on clean ground each time. Trail feeding is in the same spot is very risky in terms of Campylobacter in pregnant ewes. So it's just another point to think about if we're considering trail feeding. So thank you, Bruce. Did anyone else want to add
Thomas,
to that one? Yep.
Again, and that's actually a great point brought up by Bruce. Yeah, exactly. If you've got the space in the pens where you can sort of move that trail along 5 to 10 metres either side each time you're doing it, because it's only when it's in a consistent area and you then get the trampling and the dust build up, again talking about dust, or it's just the roughage from the hay that could be fed out, that you just get a combination of the grain often just gets lost in the dirt. And then if that becomes the case, then the other issue that can come back is to the old stone bellies that you can then get in livestock, just basically eating dirt.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's worse when it's wet.
It's worse when it's wet, Glenn?
Yeah, greater losses when it's, if you've had 5 or 10 mils the night before and you go feed. It's worse than being dry and dusty.
Yeah. Thanks for that. We might pivot from that one into talking about the troughs that you guys have set up. So the question is, you've got a couple of various trough setups that seem to be working for you. Is there anything that you do to change those trough setups to make it easier on yourself, perhaps? We'll start with you, Glenn.
Well, the only thing we could possibly do is you had them on the side of a fence. Depending on the design of your confinement lot, limits the number of sheep you can have in the confinement lot at any one time. So ours, we've chosen to go down the centre so that both sheep can feed evenly. We don't have a problem driving into the pen to feed. The sheep don't have a problem at all. We like the rubber belt troughing. It's sturdy. It's it's foolproof. Occasionally, you may have to blow it out with a blower vac to clean all the dust out.
Yep.
Which is only, it's not a major job, but that's generally done probably every feed or every second feed. But we like them much better than feed them directly onto the ground for obvious reasons.
Thanks, Glenn. And Matt, we might open up to you there. And is there anything that you would tweak in your design, or you're liking it at the moment?
No, we're sort of pretty happy with our trough feeding setup. Like I said, initially it was up against the feds and it was only single-sided access. And we just found that eventually if we wanted enough room to hold all our breeding ewes, we were just going to end up having too much trough, and too many pens. So the double-sided access is definitely been heaps better for us, definitely, without any doubt. But no, I couldn't see any big issues now or wanting to change anything at all. But like Glenn said, we do every now and then have to just blow it out with a leaf blower, and there just might be a little bit of sheep dung or a rock or a stick or something that's left in the bottom. Then but no, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's quite a simple setup too, isn't it? As you said, it's a chainsaw and a tech gun will get them installed. So very impressive.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. We'll move on to the next question. We've got another one from Tony here that's got quite a few upvotes. So the question is, are we using any buffer concentrates in the barley rations that you're feeding out? And we might be able to open that one. We'll get our producer thoughts first, and then we'll open it up to our DPI and LLS panelists. So, Glenn.
Yeah, we just add the barley to the grain. When we all get into the feed cart, then it gets mixed again when it's all down into the into the trough. So we just add barley, so all sheep have access to the lime.
Yeah. Thanks, Glenn. Yep.
Yeah.
So we're using lime? Yep.
Lime. Yes.
And Matthew, you said salt. You were using salt and lime. Is that right?
Yeah. So so probably like Glenn, we've got an additive box on the actual Broma trial feeder. It's so lime and salt is added to the barley, and it's seen as a natural buffer, I believe. The lime, I don't think it's an actual actually proved buffer itself. We don't actually use any sort of buffer like that, but we do use lime and salt definitely, and they do also have lick tubs out in their pens with line salt and cause mag, just if they feel like they need or want more access. I don't think they can ever eat too much of it, really, especially the lime.
Thanks, Matt. We'll move up to Geoff.
Well, it's all related. So we were just talking about trough length, and you can't underestimate having enough trough length so all animals can eat at once. So that's the first thing in terms of reducing the risk of acidosis. And so that we've seen with Matt and Glenn, they've reiterated the importance of having trough length. Second thing is they both actually mix their ingredients with the grain. And I actually believe this is really quite important because you can be confident then that all animals are accessing those minerals. And when you've got stock in containment for long periods of time, especially breeding animals, you want to ensure that they've got good reserves of calcium and they haven't been depleted leading up to lambing. And that potentially can be an issue when you're then taking them out of containment, using them on grazing crops as well. So I think mixing salt and lime in with the grain is really important. The other thing, I suppose, in terms of salt, depends on what the water quality is that you're using. So you might have high salt levels in water, so that will potentially negate the need. And I haven't had that experience, but if you talk to vets, they'll have more knowledge on this than I do. But maybe if you were applying salt to grain and the water was quite salty, that could actually work in the opposite way, potentially, especially when high water intakes when it's hot. So I think that's an important consideration. But certainly salt and lime is important, and if possible, mixing it with the grain.
Thanks, Geoff. Martin, anything to add to that?
Thomas, no, look again. The main protection against acidosis is actually conditioning a livestock onto the grain. It's and whether it's with weaners coming in, sort of being fed out in the paddock to start with, trailing out, whether they've had grain provided while they're still with the ewes, and I think Glenn and Matt have already explained that, that they sort of get a dribble of grain to start with, and then that amount increases over the time as the introduction period into the confinement area. And with the addition of the lime there, it just sort of helps with that. Certainly for the calcium side of it, just helps with that bit of if it is a natural buffer there. But look, the main issue of using a so-called buffer, whether that's going to be sodium bicarb, acid buff, or one of the other registered buffering products, it's really if you are going into a rush setup and you're going to be putting them under a high intake of grain, probably more than 600 grams a day to start with, is where you'd require that. But if they can be brought in gradually, 50 grams a day increment over starting at 100 grams a day, 150 grams a day, and working up to half a kilo or better within a 5 to 7 day period, you should be able to have the opportunity to minimise the risk of acidosis.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think we've rounded that question out pretty well there. So we'll move on. We've got a pretty quick, simple one here with lots of upvotes for you, Matthew. That people are interested in how your sheep are handling that long, narrow side of the trough with regards to access. Are they utilising that full trough? Do you have any of them getting stuck when you're driving past? Or
Sorry, no, don't really have any issues at all, to be honest. So from ones, from the trough to the fence, I should know this. I think it's 2 metres. You may not be able to see that in the, or have seen that in the photo. It's probably a little bit hard to depict the space, but no, there's plenty of room there. So probably by about the 3rd day, they're fully understood and sort of adjusted to the containment living, and they've worked out how to get around it. There is sections that are cut out along the troughs. You know, probably I think there's 3 sections per pen that are actually cut out, so they can walk around it. But look, most of them just jump straight over it and they clear it and they're fine. You know, they do really get used to it. It's amazing how they can adjust and get used to that containment living, I suppose. And then when they are all feeding from both sides, there's still plenty of room that they can actually walk along between the back of the sheep and the fence, if that makes sense. So, yeah. To answer the question, really, no, there's no real issue, but they get used to it, definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew.
That's
We got.
Can
10
I
minutes
just make
left.
ask a question
Jeff.
of Matt? Or Matt, you provided some good comment in terms of how you held those troughs up. You know, some simple ways of doing that. And now, do you just want to expand on how you've fixed those water troughs in place and how they are now quite sturdy?
The water troughs, you mean?
Oh, sorry, the feed troughs. Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, it's literally just PVC pipe cut in half, and then the PVC pipe trough is tech screwed to round wooden timber blocks. They're just trees cut up, basically. So the timber blocks, there's no cost there. And then at I think it's so the pipe themselves come in 6 metre lengths, and they're joined at obviously every 6 metres there's round timber blocks, and they're tech screwed to the timber blocks themselves. And then also at that point there's a half star picket post being banged right in to stop the actual the trough from tipping over if they do happen to jump on it. So hopefully, does that answer your question, Geoff? Cool.
We've just got one come up here from Rohan Wilson. Martin, you might be the best man to answer this one. Is there an ideal height for the troughs? So we've got 2 examples here with one lower to the ground and then Matthew's a little bit higher. Do you have an ideal height that has been recommended by DPI or LLS?
Well, probably the main area of concern there with Thomas, to answer that question, is it depends on the age of stock that are being fed. And if it's lambs or weaners, you basically want to make sure you've got a height. Now, whether that's, say, 30 centimetres or 300 mil above the ground, but you don't want to have an access where livestock can actually get stuck underneath it. It's so if they want to try and wedge themselves and try and get underneath it, it's usually more with the when we talk about troughing, it's probably more to do with troughing height. It's actually probably more with the water. I find it's more important because there is a hell of a difference between and as Matt showed there of his pictures where it's elevated, looks like it's probably about that 200 to 300 mil off the ground, Matt, and what I find with that is it actually just takes away a lot of the radiation heat you get off the ground, and from on confinement areas where I've been and I've had a thermometer, the difference between that 300 mil PVC or 200 mil PVC pipe with holes cut in the top of it like Matt's been using, sitting on the ground compared to sitting 300 mil above the ground has been like 4 to 6 degrees Celsius difference. So it's, but again, in turn, make sure that either the troughing is along a fence that they can't get stuck behind it. You need enough room so that it's offset from the fence enough that there is plenty of room. Might need a couple, 2, 3, 4 metres or so that the sheep can't get stuck in behind it or they can't get stuck underneath it, would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Martin. Just in light of time, we'll move on. We're going to pivot over to rations a little bit. just for the last two questions, and then any of our remaining questions we'll try and wrap up after the break, or within the break. So the question is, do any of you use lupins in your ration? Trail feed, the comment with that is trail feeding of lupins seems to work really well with little wastage. So Glenn, I might start with you. Have you considered using lupins in your concentrate feeding?
No, we haven't. We don't grow lupins, but we have used fava beans in our rations when feeding merino weather lambs. With added protein to get them to put on a bit more weight, fat.
Yeah.
But no lupins or fava beans in the adult sheep.
I guess that's a really key point too, isn't it? That you're feeding what you're growing, so it might be a bigger change if you were to start incorporating those lupins into it. Matthew, have you considered using lupins?
Not sort of two answers. Yes, we have. So when feeding lambs for fattening or feedlotting purposes, and yes, we have fed lupins just to increase protein. But with the adult sheep, the ewes, they're really only there on a maintenance diet. They're really only there to get them off the paddocks, really. So no, and they're either pre-lamb or in-lamb, so they're more needing an energy-based diet. So it's just barley, basically. So to answer it, yes, we have used lupins, but only really as a protein source with barley for lambs.
Thanks, Matthew. And Geoff, have you got anything to add to that one?
Yeah, again, obviously, developing rations, especially when you're feeding for a long time, comes down to cost. And so, obviously, lupins provides extra protein as needed. But generally, when we're maintenance feeding stock, grain's got sufficient protein in it to meet the needs of the energy that's coming from those sort of maintenance animals. So not really. But I suppose it sort of led to something that I was thinking about, and which we probably didn't sort of cover in a great deal of detail, is self-feeders and open troughs. And so Matt was suggesting how he trains his lambs onto troughs and then onto self-feeders. And that's really important. But you can't really go back the other way. You're not wanting to be maintenance feeding animals using lick feeders, for example. And so you're going to be using lupins more in production feeding type systems when you want to balancing your diets. And it just led me to the point that I thought needed to be made, is that I don't believe self-feeders are suitable for maintenance feeding livestock. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Geoff. Look, we've probably got time for one last question, and I might hog it and just open it up with a bit of a broader question. I noticed in your video, Matthew, that you said, we're just looking to build more. Essentially, that was it. You said, we're looking to build more. Glenn, again, you've been feeding for a decade. What's the next step moving forward for your operations in terms of containment feeding? Is it something you're looking to do more? You think you're at that point now? Where do you think other farmers are going to see benefit in this? We might open with you, Glenn, because your microphone is on. So throwing you in the deep end.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, we've increased as I said, we've built our second confinement lot due to increase in numbers. And generally we do use them every year, because you always find a pinch, feed pinch, generally between, normal season this is, from that end of March through to early May, especially in a mixed farming operation with cropping. You're spraying, you've got new crops in the ground, and you're not going to put sheep on the other country that you're going to put under crop. So that's where we find our confinement lots come into a lot of great play, is we can put the sheep in there whilst we're doing their farming operation, allowing the pastures to pick up. So moving forward, that's where we'll go. Increase our numbers. We may increase our numbers as we get further confidence with the seasons. At this stage, we're pretty happy.
Matthew, we might just get you to follow up on that.
Yeah, so the goal is obviously to have enough containment pens to hold all our adult sheep. We aren't quite there yet, but we're getting that way, and we're sort of in the process of trying to build more now. So it's definitely something that we love and would do. I'd especially here would do every year. Even if it's for a month or 6 weeks until that feed gets away, it allows us to run more stock. We are sort of, I'd consider us reasonably high stocking rates. We're sort of in a higher rainfall zone, so we sort of, if you don't take advantage of the grass when it's there, I believe when it's there in winter and spring, and then this allows you to run that amount of stock for then, and then when they're not, when the grass isn't in the paddock or you want to lock certain paddocks up, you can put them in containment.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Just very lastly, Geoff, Martin, what do you think? Where do you think it goes for operations? Do you think that they should be, really considering this as an opportunity to increase productivity?
Oh, absolutely. I think they're becoming more common. I think and when you get a break of season, maximising leaf area on your pastures and your grazing crops so that they can grow while it's warm and while you've got moisture is really important. So keeping stock off paddocks when things are germinating and starting to grow is so beneficial, because it then sets you up much better for, the winter feed gap or that late autumn feed gap. Often I see people put stock back out in the paddocks too early when the leaf area is insufficient, and so it doesn't last very long, and then there's no leaf area to grow while it's warm from an autumn break. So you're better off being really patient and continuing to feed a little bit longer, maximise that growth when it's warm before the temperatures really start to get cold, and that way you'll actually get this exponential benefit in what you get from your feed source. So certainly has a role to play. Just before you go to I just wanted to make one comment which we didn't cover as well, and that's really about calibration of feeding. Often what happens is people think they're feeding a certain amount of grain, and it's great that Martin and Glenn have scales on their feeders, but they're relatively new systems. But often people are timing either through gravity or out of an auger, and so it's really important that people calibrate their grain, because often they'll find that they're underfeeding or potentially even overfeeding. And different grains flow differently, wheat and barley different. And when you add salt and lime on it, that also reduces flow rate. So you think your calibration might be 140 kilos a minute, you put lime on it and it could come back 20 kilos a minute or more. And so when you're feeding over a long period, animals might not perform as you believe. And because it's a very gradual weight loss, and probably people aren't going to be weighing their stock very much, you won't notice it. But so I can't stress the importance of calibration. Sorry, Martin.
Thanks, Geoff. Martin, we'll hand over to you. I've just muted you again. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas, and thank you, Geoff. Look, all I'd like to just to add, I suppose, just to finish here, is talk about increasing stock numbers, but what a stock management area or confinement feeding area will provide is, if you're running your core breeder base, whether it's sheep or it's cattle, but where it will provide, as I say, the additional opportunity is if there's where it could be just like the trade stock, for example. It could be buying lambs and finishing them off, or bringing in, because at the end of the day, outside of wool production, it's the kilos of beef or lamb that is produced on farm, and if you can increase that production of beef or lamb through whether it's a 3-month session in a 6 to 9, 12-week feeding program in a confinement feeding area from lambs you might have bought as trade stock, that's extra dollars. It's, as I say, so it becomes a very integral part of the management process of the farm, being the stock management area, which allows you the versatility to expand the stock numbers, but not necessarily just your core breeder base. It might help with that as well, but it just gives you those other opportunities.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. And look, that brings us to time here this morning. So thank you very much to all of our panel guests. I'd ask you in joining me in thanking them, but it'd be quite silent, so we'll remotely say thank you. We're moving now. Not a problem, Geoff. We're now moving into morning tea. So just a reminder from what Tony said this morning, grab yourself a cuppa and then come back and have a look at some of our sponsor videos. So they'll be rolling for the next 25 minutes before the concurrent beef and sheep sessions start. So once again, a very, very big thank you to all of our panelists. Any questions that are left remaining, we'll try to get answered now for you. And yeah, enjoy your morning tea. See you later.